You know those days where you just feel off, completely out of sync. Maybe it's that brain fog after a long flight, or just feeling sluggish after staying up too late. But then there's the opposite, right? Waking up naturally, feeling sharp or fresh. What if I told you there's this hidden clock inside you, running everything from sleep to hormones down to, well, even your cells? Today we're taking a deep dive into exactly that, circadian rhythms. The name itself kind of gives it away. It's from the Latin circa dies, meaning around a day. So we're talking about these roughly 24-hour cycles that basically orchestrate our biology. And here's the really key thing. It's not just any 24-hour cycle. A circadian rhythm is endogenous. It comes from within us. But crucially, it's also entrainable. External cues can reset it, nudge it. It's this amazing balance between our internal time and the world around us.
Exactly. And the whole point of these rhythms really is coordination. They line up almost all our biological processes, so everything happens at the best possible time. It's about maximizing, well, fitness, survival. And it's not just us humans. You find these clocks everywhere. Animals, plants, fungi, even really ancient bacteria. The fact they evolved independently again and again tells you just how fundamental they are. And those external cues you mentioned, light, temperature, even when we eat. Scientists call them Zeitgebers. It's a German word. It means time givers. They're how our inner clock stays synced up.
Okay, so that's our mission for you today. We want to really unpack these internal clocks. By the end of this, you'll get what makes them tick, why they're so critical for health, and maybe most importantly, what goes wrong when they get disrupted. Think of it as your shortcut to understanding a really core part of your own biology. All right, let's unpack this. Maybe start way back, like the earliest hints. Picture this. 4th century BC, Greece. There's this philosopher, Theophrastus. And he's describing a tamarind tree, how its leaves fold up at night and open again at sunrise. He even mentioned the locals saying the plant goes to sleep. It's amazing, right? An ancient observation of this rhythm.
Yeah, those early observations were like planting seeds for later science. Then you jump forward quite a bit to 1729. A French scientist, Jean-Jacques Dortu de Meuron, he did this really elegant experiment with Mimosa pudica plants, you know, the ones that close up when you touch them. He put them in constant darkness. And the fascinating thing was their leaves kept opening and closing on that roughly 24-hour schedule. That was basically the first solid proof of an internal clock, something endogenous, not just reacting to the sun. A huge step.
Totally. A huge leap. And then things really started picking up steam in the 20th century. 1959, you've got Franz Hallberg actually coining the term circadian, giving it a proper name.
Yeah.
But the really big breakthrough was genetic. 1971, Ron Konopka and Seymour Benzer identified the period gene PER in fruit flies Drosophila. And that wasn't just about flies. It was like finding a key to this universal mechanism. It showed this incredibly conserved biological clock working across species. So fundamental, it led to the Nobel Prize in 2017 for Hall, Rosbash, and Young.
Right. And building on all that, scientists set up some clear rules, basically, for what counts as circadian. 3 main criteria. First, it has to have an endogenous free-running period, meaning it keeps going on its own, even in constant conditions, like total darkness. And that internal rhythm, called tau, is approximately 24 hours. Interestingly, for daytime animals like us, tau tends to be slightly longer than 24 hours. For nocturnal animals, it's often slightly shorter, helps them anticipate, you know. Second criterion, it has to be entrainable, resettable. Those Zeitgebers we mentioned, light, meals that can shift the clock.
Like jet lag. That awful feeling is literally your clock being out of sync and then slowly resetting to the new place.
Exactly. That's entrainment in action, or maybe in action for a few days. And the third rule is temperature compensation. This one's subtle but really important. Your body temperature naturally fluctuates a bit, but the circadian clock needs to keep steady time despite that. So it maintains its roughly 24-hour cycle across a range of normal body temperatures. It has to be reliable.
Okay, so it's internal, it's adjustable, and it's stable. But why? Why did these clocks evolve? You said it's not just sleep, which is already huge. What's the bigger picture? Is it about sort of predicting the future, like knowing dawn is coming?
That's a great way to put it. Anticipation is key. It lets organisms get ready for predictable changes, light, dark, food availability, predator activity. It confers a massive selective advantage, being proactive, not just reactive.
Yeah, and the why has a few layers. One early idea was protecting DNA. Like maybe clocks evolved to make sure sensitive stuff like DNA replication happened at night, away from damaging UV rays. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, that seems plausible.
But newer research points towards something potentially even more fundamental, linked to oxygen. It suggests that these clocks co-evolved with certain proteins, redox proteins, especially after the Earth's atmosphere got oxygenated, the Great Oxidation Event. The idea is that rhythms help protect cells from reactive oxygen species, ROS, those are damaging byproducts, often generated by daylight metabolism. So the clock anticipates and defends. It's like an internal scheduled defense system. Wow. From DNA protection to fighting oxygen damage. It's deep stuff.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how simple the core mechanism can be sometimes. You mentioned cyanobacteria.
Oh, absolutely. Their clock is stunningly simple. You can actually rebuild it in a test tube in vitro with just 3 key proteins, Chi, Chi-B, Chi-C, and some energy, ATP, and it just oscillates, keeps time all by itself. It's a beautiful example of biochemical timekeeping.
Just 3 proteins. That's incredible. Okay, so from bacteria, how does this scale up? What about plants?
Plants are fascinating. Their circadian clocks run so much. Leaf movements that sleeping Theophrastus saw, it's called nyctinacity. Also growth patterns when they flower, even when they release fragrances to attract pollinators. It's all time.
How do they sync up? Still light?
Mostly light, yeah. They have special photoreceptors, phytochromes, cryptochromes that sense different colors and intensities of light. There was this great experiment with Arabidopsis, the lab rat of the plant world. They grew best when the lab's light-dark cycle perfectly matched their own internal clock cycle. Shows how important that sync is. There's also this idea of a metabolic dawn, that the sugars they make during photosynthesis actually feed back and help set the clock, linking energy directly to time.
Okay, plants have it figured out. What about extreme environments? Like the Arctic? Constant daylight or darkness must mess things up, right?
It does get tricky. Some animals, like reindeer, seem to mostly lose their strong circadian rhythms during the constant light of summer or the constant dark of winter. They still have daily cycles, but maybe less internally driven.
They just go with the flow.
Sort of, but then you have others, like ground squirrels or porcupines up in Alaska. Even when the sun technically never sets in summer, they seem to maintain their rhythms by tracking the sun's lowest point on the horizon. It's like they find a subtle cue even in the constant light. Pretty clever.
Very clever. Okay, and insects. We mentioned the fruit fly discovery.
Right, Drosophila is the classic model. We understand its molecular clock really well, these interlocking feedback loops of proteins like PER, TIM, chlorocyclic, cicicely. It's quite intricate.
But it's more than just basic function, isn't it?
Oh, much more. Think about monarch butterflies and their incredible migration. They navigate using the sun, but since the sun moves, they need a time-compensated compass. And guess what provides the time?
A circadian clock.
Exactly. A clock located in their antenna, of all places. It's crucial for their navigation. And even things like moth mating, it's highly synchronized. Females release pheromones at specific times, which can actually reset the male moth's clock to trigger mating behavior at night.
Wow, antenna clocks and synchronized mating. Okay, let's bring it back to us. Humans, mammals. Where's our main clock? Our internal orchestrator, you could say.
That would be the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. It's a tiny cluster of nerve cells deep in the hypothalamus part of the brain.
Okay, the SCN, the master clock.
Pretty much. It gets direct light information from special cells in the retina of our eyes. These cells have a pigment called melanopsin, which is particularly sensitive to blue light.
The blue light connection.
Yeah. And based on that light info, the SCN tells the pineal gland, another small gland in the brain, when to produce melatonin.
The sleep hormone.
Right. Melatonin levels rise in the evening, peak at night, telling our body it's time to wind down and sleep and then drop off in the morning. And here's something really telling about the SCN's power. If you were to carefully remove SCN cells from an animal and keep them alive in a lab dish, continue to oscillate, they maintain their own rhythm, even totally isolated from the body and any external cues. It shows how truly autonomous that master clock is.
That's incredible, just ticking away on their own.
Yeah.
It does make you wonder, though, could there be super subtle cues even in a dish? It's complex. Now, speaking of human rhythms, there was that old idea, wasn't there, that our natural day is actually 25 hours long.
Ah, yes, the bunker studies. Some early isolation experiments did suggest that. It turns out those studies weren't perfectly shielded from light. Even dim artificial light could have influenced the results.
Okay, so flawed data.
Somewhat. A much more rigorous study done at Harvard around 1999 kept people in truly constant, very dim conditions. And that found our average internal clock runs much closer to 24 hours, about 24 hours and 11 minutes on average.
Closer, but still not exactly 24. So we constantly need that little nudge from daylight to stay synced.
Exactly. That's the entrainment part. And there's another interesting layer, is slight differences between sexes. A study in 2010 suggested women tend to have a slightly shorter intrinsic period, around 24 hours and 5 minutes maybe, compared to men, closer to 24 hours and 11 or 12 minutes.
Shorter for women. Does that explain why women often tend to be more morning people?
It might contribute, yeah. The tendency to be a morning lark versus a night owl chronotype is partly genetic, and this period length difference could play a role.
Interesting. So if our clock isn't exactly 24 hours, and there are these individual differences,
Yeah.
how do researchers actually track someone's internal time? What are the markers?
Good question. We use specific biological markers. One key one is dim light melatonin onset, or DLMO. Basically, when melatonin levels start to rise in the evening under dim light conditions, usually around 9 p.m. for the average adult.
Okay, DLMO. What else?
Core body temperature. It follows a very clear rhythm, reaching its lowest point, typically a couple of hours before you naturally wake up, around 4 or 5 a.m. for many.
So your coldest point is just before waking.
Generally, yes. And then there are hormone levels like plasma cortisol, which peaks in the morning to help wake us up. These give us windows into the internal clock's timing. But here's where it gets even more complex. Remember, the SCN is the master clock.
Yeah, the conductor.
Well, Joseph Takahashi's work really highlighted that it's not the only clock. His research showed that essentially almost every cell in the body contains a circadian clock.
Every cell. Seriously.
Almost. These are called peripheral clocks. In your liver, your muscles, your fat cells, even your skin.
Wow. So it's not just the brain sending signals.
The SCN coordinates them, yes, but these peripheral clocks can also respond to other cues, like the clock in your liver is heavily influenced by when you eat. Skin cell clocks can even respond directly to light exposure.
So it's a whole network, a hierarchy of clocks.
Exactly, a complex, interconnected system keeping time throughout the body. It's really quite sophisticated.
Okay, so this intricate system exists. What happens when we mess with it? Which, let's be honest, many of us do. A lot. What are the real-world consequences of disrupting our circadian rhythm?
Yeah, modern life throws a lot of curveballs at our internal clocks. A big one is indoor lighting, especially the blue light from LEDs and screens. It's very effective at suppressing melatonin production, much more than older incandescent lighting.
So late-night screen time is basically telling our brain it's still daytime.
Pretty much. And studies show that chronic nighttime light exposure can be linked to things like depression symptoms. The good news is, restoring a regular light-dark cycle often helps reverse that.
What about lifestyles? Shift work, travel?
Huge disruptors, airline pilots, cabin crew, emergency workers, anyone doing shift work. Their schedules are constantly fighting their internal clocks. This leads to fatigue, reduced performance, and frankly, increased safety risks in many jobs.
And what about things like alcohol or drugs? Do they impact the clock?
Absolutely. There's a strong two-way street there. A disrupted circadian rhythm seems to increase vulnerability to substance abuse and relapse. And conversely, using substances, especially alcohol, definitely messes with your sleep architecture and your clock function. Some research suggests stabilizing rhythms could even be a tool in addiction recovery.
Okay, so light, lifestyle substances. These disruptions aren't trivial. What are the harder health consequences? We mentioned jet lag. That's the obvious short-term one. Feeling groggy, disoriented. Your body's time is just wrong for the location.
Right. But the long-term stuff is more concerning. There are clear links to mental health issues. Bipolar disorder, for instance, often involves significant circadian disruption. Also depression, anxiety, and specific sleep disorders like delayed sleep phase disorder, where people are like permanent night owls.
And physical health, heart disease, metabolism.
Definitely. For cardiovascular disease, there was this really stark study with hamsters that had a genetic mutation giving them a faster 22-hour clock. When they were forced onto a standard 24-hour light-dark cycle, they developed serious heart and kidney problems.
Wow. Just from being out of sync.
Exactly. But when they lived on a 22-hour cycle that matched their internal clock, they were perfectly healthy. It powerfully shows the danger of misalignment. We see echoes in humans, too. Shift workers tend to have higher levels of inflammatory markers linked to atherosclerosis and higher triglycerides contributing to heart disease risk.
In metabolism, does being out of sync affect weight or diabetes risk?
Yes, strongly. Shift work, irregular eating patterns, they're linked to poorer insulin sensitivity, increased risk of obesity, and type 2 diabetes. Animal studies show that if you make mice eat during their normal sleep time, they gain significantly more weight than mice eating the same amount during their active time. timing really matters for metabolism.
Okay, what about our brains? Cognitive function.
Yeah, there are cognitive effects too. Chronic shift work is associated with more errors on the job, slower reaction times, impaired decision making. And some research even suggests a link between long-term circadian disruption, especially from shift work starting after age 50, and an increased risk of dementia later in life. It impacts brain health over the long run.
That's quite a list of potential problems. But surely understanding all this is leading to solutions. Is there hope?
Absolutely. This understanding is driving a field called circadian medicine. One major area is chronotherapeutics. It's about timing medical treatments to work with the body's clock.
Like taking certain meds at a specific time of day.
Exactly. For example, some blood pressure medications might be more effective if taken at bedtime, aligning with natural blood pressure rhythms. Certain cancer chemotherapies seem to be more effective and have fewer side effects when timed to match the cell cycle rhythms of tumor cells versus healthy cells.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Using the body's own timing to our advantage.
Right. And researchers are also developing experimental drugs that directly target the molecular clock machinery. Some have shown promise in animal models for reducing damage after a heart attack, for instance. But it's crucial, as we develop these therapies, to remember those sex differences we talked about. Treatments might need to be tailored because men's and women's clocks aren't identical.
That's really important for personalized medicine. And on a simpler level, maybe things we can do ourselves. What about naps? Do they help or hurt?
Good question. Short naps, like 20-30 minutes, generally seem beneficial. Studies suggest brief daytime naps can reduce stress hormones, improve alertness and productivity, usually without significantly disrupting your main nighttime sleep or your overall circadian rhythm. Longer naps, though, especially late in the day, can sometimes interfere.
Okay, so a short power nap gets a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Good to know. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from ancient Greeks noticing sleeping plants all the way to the complex molecular clocks ticking away in nearly every cell of our bodies. We've seen how vital these rhythms are for health, for mood, for thinking clearly.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How much attention do you actually pay to your own internal clock? Are you listening to its signals?
That is the question, isn't it? In this world that's always on, always pushing us to override our natural rhythms with bright screens, late nights, weird schedules, what's one small thing, maybe just one conscious step you could take tomorrow to try and align just a little bit better with your own internal time? And what could the ripple effects of that be on how you feel, how you function, your overall health? Something to think about.